Hello and welcome back to my channel. As we approach the end of 2024 somehow, it only makes sense to start looking ahead to the next year. Since a number of announcements have been made in recent weeks about tax changes or updates for 2025, I thought I'd break some of them down for you so you know what to expect. So let's start with tax brackets. As you may know, if you watched my video all about income taxes in Canada, we have a progressive tax system in this country in which we pay different rates of tax on different levels of income. These tax brackets exist for both federal and provincial/territorial income taxes. And to give you an idea of what those tax brackets were this year, here is a look at the federal tax brackets and Ontario provincial tax brackets for 2024. Now, speaking of filing income tax, the earliest you can file your 2024 income taxes is Monday, February 17th, 2025. And the deadline to file your taxes is Wednesday, April 30th if you're an employee, or Monday, June 16th if you're self-employed. But if you're watching this and you are self-employed, please don't forget that although you have until June 16th to file your taxes, if you owe any income tax to the government that you haven't already prepaid, that money is still due on April 30th. That's the payment due date. If you don't pay by this date, well then the CRA will charge you interest. And who wants to pay the government more money than necessary? Not me. Okay, going back to tax brackets, they are typically indexed to inflation. So the bracket amounts have increased for 2025. As you can see, the federal tax brackets have increased by 2.7%, and the Ontario tax brackets have increased by 2.8%, except for the 150,000 and 220,000 brackets. As I mentioned, all provinces and territories have their own tax brackets. So make sure to refer to your provincial or territorial government's website for those. Along the same lines, there's the basic personal amount, and that amount has increased for 2025. The basic personal amount is a non-refundable tax credit that everyone can claim and is the amount of income you can earn without having to pay any tax. Just like there are federal and provincial territorial tax brackets, there is also a federal basic personal amount and provincial/territorial basic personal amounts. Now, I'm just going to focus on the federal BPA, but you can find your provincial or territorial BPA on your respective government website. Now, in 2024, the federal BPA was $15,705. For 2025, it's increased to $16,129. So this means when you file your 2024 income taxes, you won't owe any tax on your first $15,705 of income. And when you eventually file your 2025 income taxes, you won't owe any tax on your first $16,129 of income. However, these BPA amounts only apply to taxpayers whose income for the year is less than or equal to the amount at which the 29% federal tax bracket begins, which is $173,205 for 2024 and $177,882 for 2025. If your income is higher than these amounts in their respective years, the basic personal amount gets gradually clawed back up until your income hits or exceeds the 33% tax bracket threshold. At that point, your BPA will be the lower amounts of either $14,156 for 2024 or $14,538 for 2025. In other words, if you're in the top federal tax bracket, you'll have a reduced basic personal amount compared to taxpayers in lower tax brackets. Okay, now let's move on to the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, RRSP. As you may already know, everyone gets a different amount of RRSP contribution room depending on their income. Essentially, the more you earn, the more RRSP room you can get, up to a limit. You either get the lesser of 18% of your income from the previous year or the annual limit set by the CRA. This limit was $31,560 for 2024, but it's increased to $32,490 for 2025, which is an increase of $930. Another thing to keep in mind is that you also have until February 29th, 2025 to contribute to your RRSP and have those contributions count as tax deductions on your 2025 2024 taxes. This is what's called the first 60 days rule, or is commonly referred to in the media as RRSP season. But what about tax-free savings accounts, TFSAs? Well, TFSAs work a bit differently in that everyone gets the same amount of new TFSA contribution room every year, no matter what their income is. This amount typically increases every few years, but for 2025, it's staying the same as 2024, which is $7,000. Now, once you turn 18, you start accruing TFSA contribution room, which is also why, depending on your age, you may have less or more TFSA contribution room than someone else. For instance, if you turn 18 in 2025, you'll only have $7,000 of TFSA contribution room. But if you were 18 years old or older in 2009 when the TFSA was first introduced and have never contributed a dollar to your TFSA since then, well, as of 2025, your total available TFSA contribution room would equal $102,000. Now onto Registered Education Savings Plans, RESPs. The Annual Education Assistance Payment, EAP, threshold has increased for 2025 compared to 2024. If you have no idea what an EAP is, let me explain. An education assistance payment is simply the amount withdrawn from an RESP once your child is enrolled in a post-secondary program that represents any income earned inside the account, such as interest, dividends, or capital gains, as well as Canada Education Savings Grant, CESG money, and Canada Learning Bond, CLB money. EAPs are taxable in the hands of the beneficiary, meaning if your child is going to post-secondary, when they withdraw EAP money to pay tuition and other education costs, they have to pay tax on those withdrawals. But since they're a student and likely in a very low tax bracket, they often pay little or no income tax on it anyway. And for any principal inside the RESP, meaning the contributions that were made to the account, well, no tax is owed on those since those contributions are considered after-tax dollars, meaning tax was already paid on those contributions before they entered into the account. Okay, now that you know that, when it comes to EAPs, there are some restrictions when it comes to making a withdrawal. Now, the first layer of restrictions is you can only withdraw $8,000 of EAPs in the first 13 weeks of full-time study. If you're enrolled in a part-time program, you're limited to withdrawing $4,000 in the first 13 weeks. After those 13 weeks, though, you can withdraw as much as you want. However, here's the second layer of restrictions. If you wish to withdraw more than the annual EAP threshold limit, which was $28,122 for 2024 and has increased to $28,881 for 2025, you have to provide documentation like receipts to your RESP provider to prove that your withdrawal request is reasonable. If they consider your request to be unreasonable, for instance, they believe that the costs you incurred are not in line with furthering the student's education, they could deny your request. But if you withdraw less than these thresholds, you don't have to provide any documentation. Okay, now let's look at changes to the Canada Pension Plan, CPP. The CPP contribution rate for both employees and employers remains the same for 2025 compared to 2024. As an employee, you contribute 5.95% of your income to CPP, and your employer also contributes 5.95%. If you're self-employed, you pay both the employee and employer portion, totaling 11.9%. However, you only contribute that percentage up to a certain dollar limit. For 2024, the most you would contribute to CPP as an employee or employer would be $3,867.50. If you're self-employed, the limit would be $7,735. For 2025, those limits have increased to $4,034.10 for employees or employers, or $8,068.20 for self-employed individuals. But let's not forget about the Canada Pension Plan Enhancement, or CPP2. If you earn above a certain level of income, you have to contribute an extra layer of CPP up to a certain maximum. For 2024, here's what that looked like. For any income earned above the 2024 yearly maximum pensionable earnings amount of $68,500 up to the yearly additional maximum pensionable earnings amount of $73,200, employees and employers would have to contribute an extra 4% to CPP. So doing a little math, $73,200 minus $68,500 equals $4,700 times 4% equals $188. And of course, if you're self-employed, you'd have to pay the employee and employer amounts. So the maximum amount you'd pay in CPP2 in 2024 would be $376. But these contribution amounts have increased for 2025. For any income earned above $71,300 up to $81,200, employees and employers have to contribute an extra 4% to CPP. Let's look at the math. So $81,200 minus $71,300 equals $9,990. Times 4% equals $396. That is the maximum amount of CPP2 you'd have to pay in 2025. And if you're self-employed, that amount is double, so it would be $792. Now on to employment insurance, EI. First, the amounts you can get from EI are going up in 2025. In 2024, the highest amount you could get from EI was $668 a week, but that amount has increased to $695 a week for 2025. Not only that, the EI premium rate, the percentage of an employee's insurable earnings that they will pay in EI premiums for the year, have actually gone down. In 2024, the rate was 1.66%, but it's decreasing to 1.64%. Nevertheless, the maximum annual premium amount, which is the most you can pay into EI in a year as an employee, is going up. In 2024, the most you could pay into EI was $1,049.12, but in 2025, it will be increasing to $1,077.48. Okay, the last thing I want to share is something new the federal government is doing this year. It's called the GST HST Holiday Tax Break, and beginning December 14th, 2024 and ending February 15th, 2025, no GST or HST will be charged on certain items, including children's clothing and footwear, diapers, car seats, toys, jigsaw puzzles, video game consoles and controllers, physical video games, physical books, printed newspapers, Christmas and similar decorative trees, and food and beverages and related services. Now, as stated on the government's website, as a consumer, you will automatically receive this tax break on qualifying products you buy when you make a purchase. But I can only imagine the headache this is going to be for small businesses who only have a few short weeks to implement this into their payment systems. But anyways, doesn't matter. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and although it has nothing to do with taxes, another big thing that's happening in 2025 is I've got my book coming out. Everything But Money, The Hidden Barriers Between You and Financial Freedom is now available for pre-order, but as of December 31st, 2024, New Year's Eve, it will be hitting bookshelves and you can buy a copy, and I think you're gonna really like it. But, anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or have anything you want to say, put it in the comments. I always appreciate a nice comment. A nice one. But thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video.